I must get a new introductory slide made up because we've changed the name. It's not Global Atheist News Review anymore. It's Views on the News. Anyway, welcome wherever you are, everybody. And we have our usual panel of interesting people with wise and witty opinions to regale us with concerning the news of the religious events that have happened over the past 7 days. We have Tersia from South Africa. There they all are. Tersia, hello Tersia. Guy
Hello.
from Manchester, UK.
Hi,
P Higgs, Dread Higgs from British Columbia.
Shiver me
Canada.
timbers.
David Orenstein from Manhattan,
Hello.
USA. Frank Lovell from Kentucky, USA.
Hi, y'all.
And Esther, the Afro-humanist from Birmingham, UK.
Hello.
We may get some others arrive later on during the show. So, the first item, we've got a lot to cover, but the first item is the sad state of affairs that's going on in Iran. As everybody knows by now, there was this incident with a young woman who was arrested for not wearing her hijab properly. During custody, she died. And since then, there's been protests against the government of Iran. They've clamped down on the protesters, and so far they have executed 4 of them. They have 18 other people in the death sentence row waiting to be executed. One of them recently hanged was a 22-year-old karate champion, and he was hanged just 65 days after his arrest. The sham trials, they're described as sham by, the organizations like the UN who look after these things. And the intention, it seems, by the Iranian government is to strike fear into the hands of the protesters who are demanding freedom and an end to the clerical regime. Now, I don't imagine any of you guys are surprised at what's going on, but I'd like to hear your reaction.
Well, I mean, 15 minutes to defend yourself against any charge, let alone one involving the death penalty, is a simple breach of the human right to a fair trial. That's the first point, I think, seems to me.
Yeah. Well, I think that, different decade, same outcome, sadly, in that you have people of goodwill who want their own personal liberties, and you have a religious fascist government that will deny them to the point of murdering people for any circumstance. And I think I've mentioned on this show before that, a hallmark of real change, not just protest, but change, is for the people who are doing the shooting at the protesters to stop shooting at the protesters, and in some cases turn their weapons on the government. Once you have that level of rising up, then you will have real change. Until then, all you're going to have is this civil unrest, which we have to, as brothers and sisters in the secular free thought movement, we have to support. But real change comes when there's regime change, not just slight changes in policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, of course, the other country that's always in the news due to a difference of opinion between its government and many of its population is Afghanistan, where you'll love this, a Taliban official has said there are differences between a perfect mind, men, and a flawed mind, women.
Don't tell my wife.
I mean, that's just plain religious bigotry and prejudice and misogyny. And there's no other word for it. And of course, it's due directly to their religious beliefs, but no doubt reinforced by their culture, which I suppose there's a close interplay between their culture and Islam.
Mhm.
It's Bronze Age thinking. You know, you
Right.
can just shorten that down to bat, as in batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I have to break a lance for the Bronze Age people, because I'm following a series on Netflix about the history of the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and what I find deeply ironic, if we look at the modern application of Islam in countries like Afghanistan and Iran, in the heyday of the Ottoman Empire, women actually had very high status. In fact, it was acknowledged that the mother of the sultan was often the power behind the throne, and de facto, as in it was well known that the major influence in the life of the boy sultan was his mother, and the mother chose the wife or the well, they had more than one wife, but she chose the women who would bear the sons very carefully. They had to be smart, they had to be intellectual, they had to be smart people, because they took primary responsibility for raising the sultan. And there was actually in the 1500s had such high regard for women. Yes, they were kept in harems and they didn't have the same legal rights, but there would be no attempt to say things like that the brain of a man is superior to that of a woman. So even if you look at the heritage of Islam,
Right.
there's a strong something changed, something in the combination of the
You know,
and,
that
and,
point's
and
well
the,
taken for sure.
it's
Yeah.
and it's perhaps one should focus on that a little bit and remind Muslims that in traditional Ottoman societies, at least, women had high status, and their opinions and their power was acknowledged and honored.
Well,
You know,
good
it's
luck to
also
trying to
interesting.
persuade them to adopt that point of view.
It's also interesting to note that you know, the Arabs, of course, were responsible for a lot of the advancements in astronomy, in mathematics. But since the advent of Islam, you don't. There's nothing. There's really nothing. Even Nobel Prize winners, you don't find them coming from Islam countries or Muslim countries.
Esther, I want to get your views on this. Did you? I know you had a break.
Yes, I had a little mishap.
Yes, in your connection. So what we're discussing now is the saying of the Taliban official, which was, there are differences between a perfect mind, men, and a flawed mind, women.
Wait,
Go.
Hope my wife didn't hear that.
Right, exactly.
who gave birth to these people that have the perfect mind? Who birthed them?
Yeah.
So you're telling me that one who hasn't got a perfect mind birth someone with look, you can't. The one with the perfect mind cannot do without the woman, right? In this religion, I'm saying,
That's right. Yeah.
right? He not only needs just the one. He Well, in some cases he's allowed to have four. He can't do without. He has his mother who brought him into this life, right? And somehow, because of what's hanging between his legs, that somehow gets him to being one with a perfect mind. Excuse me, how does that work?
Well, he's obviously thinking with that bit that hangs between his
Yeah.
legs.
I was going to say that's the problem right there.
Yes.
He's a perfect dick.
Yes. That's right. So what he went on to say is a deduction or a conclusion from his attitude towards the minds of men and women. He deduced this. He said, so all international laws can be broken in the face of God's law.
Yeah, therein lies
Good luck
another
on that
big,
one. Yeah, good luck.
big one. Yeah.
Yep.
So he's claiming
I
We
wonder.
have to fight that. It's just we just can't accept that, obviously.
Yeah.
indeed.
No, absolutely not.
I just wonder what he talks to with his wife at night. I suppose the wife is just.
No, he doesn't talk to his wife. His wife
Of
just
course
has to
not.
obey him and do
Wives, wives,
Yeah.
wives, Tersia, not just one, 4. Usually they allow 4, and don't forget they allow 4 wives, but then they
Yes.
also allowed concubines. No, what do you call those ones?
Consorts.
The war slaves.
Okay.
Yeah, well, concubines is a perfectly acceptable word. I mean, bits on the side.
And
Well-
and also 72 virgins,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
That's
indeed.
a lot of
Yeah.
friends with benefits.
Yeah.
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 So what is this? What is this idea of talking to your wife? I mean, the most feared expression that a man can hear from his woman is, "We've got to talk."
Ugh. Ugh. Usually when I was married, the moment my ex, the moment he says we need to talk, I know that there's trouble.
Yes,
There is trouble. So
absolutely.
no,
You
just
know,
I do not want to hear it. Just no.
from my end here, it's when my wife falls silent that I gotta worry.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's wrong, dear? Fine, I'm fine. Nothing.
But what
Or-
Fred, it doesn't happen often, does it?
But what an entree to keep more than 50% of the population under your thumb, right? Keep masks on their face. If they decide to take a mask off, shoot them. If they protest wearing a mask, shoot them. You know, steal 50 women from a school because they're just not human.
Yes,
You remove people's humanity,
That's right.
and that's not just in Islam. That's every faith tradition, as far as I can see. So, you know, what you find, I think, in Islam is this misogyny on steroids, but it's not like it doesn't exist everywhere else in every theology.
Well, that's true.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
On,
probably,
that sub- on the subject
probably
of
even,
sorry, Frank, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, it's the worst in Afghanistan and where the Taliban is.
It
It's
is.
pretty
That's
bad
right.
in places like Iran, Iraq. And over here, we have some too, but I think we're way ahead of them in being reasonable compared to those Mid-East related places. There's just something,
But at the same,
something
by the
about
same
that
token, we
area.
shouldn't be complacent. We shouldn't be complacent here.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, right.
So staying with Afghanistan, an MP and one of the few female MPs and her bodyguard were shot dead at her home in the capital, Kabul, last week. She was one of the few female MPs who foolishly, it turns out, stayed in Kabul after the Taliban seized power in August 21. Her brother and a second security guard were wounded in the attack, and the poor woman has been praised as a fearless champion for Afghanistan who turned down the chance to leave the country.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting that she had at least 2 bodyguards, security guards. I mean, that's amazing. That shows that she's under threat.
Yes, yes indeed.
And before this happened, I bet she received countless death threats.
Yes,
Yeah.
doubtless. Yes.
You know, you have people like this who I put people like this on the same level as Malcolm X and Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King, who are assassinated because
Yeah.
they have a contrarian view that is open to civil rights and human rights,
Yes. Yes.
and that's sadly, you know, the only way they can win the argument is with a bullet, because
Yes.
they can't win it with an idea.
No.
Yeah.
Or
They're
with
not really winning the argument.
No. That's a strategy that's echoed down the ages.
Yes.
Turning to your original homeland, Esther,
Yes.
a Nigerian priest was burned alive in the north, in the Kaduna area, I think. No, Pokoro area. It's actually Niger State, which is, I'm not sure what the situation, how sovereign is it compared to Nigeria? It might be a bit of a loose relationship there. But what happened apparently is gunmen failed to break into the priest's house, so instead they set it on fire.
So with these is this part where there's fighting between Christians and Islam?
Yes,
Islamic.
yes.
I must
oh,
say
so
that
it's religiously
I must say
motivated.
I must say that Niger State is actually one of the states in Nigeria.
Is it? Yes.
It
Yeah.
is one
So
of the states.
it's not the same as Niger, which is an
No,
independent state.
Ah,
no,
right.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
it isn't.
Okay.
Mm. This
Okay.
is actually it's pronounced Niger State.
Oh, is it?
Niger.
Oh, right. Well, thank you.
And there've always been these problems between Christians and Muslims. When you
Yes.
think about Nigeria, the way religion is divided in Nigeria is such that it's nearly half and half. The Muslims reckon they're more than the Christians, and so when it comes to things like division of power, when it comes to who's going to be the next president, oh no, he's got to be a Muslim because the last one was a Christian. Oh, this one,
Mm.
the next one, it's this. It always brings up these problems. The Christians are afraid that the Muslims want to Islamize Nigeria.
Yeah.
The Muslims, they want dominance, right? So it's always as far as I'm concerned, it's something that would always,
Yes.
it would keep happening
Mhm.
Yeah.
until if they try and find some kind of resolve, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
would always hear these things in the
Yes.
news. I am not surprised
There's
hearing
no.
this. It's
Yeah. There's
I,
no
I'm
prospect of a settlement. No.
it's
No
sad
prospect
though.
of negotiation.
It
Yeah.
is sad. I mean, hearing things like that.
I think it was Bertrand Russell. I'm blanking on who the quote is by, but he was asked, is there anything that he's willing to lay his life down for? So anything that he's willing to die for? And he said, no, I don't think so, because what if I'm wrong?
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
Yes.
that's the one thing about faith,
Yes.
and whether it's in Islam or Christianity, you can't ever be wrong.
Yes.
You must be right. And that's why it's so easy for people who are convinced by faith to do things like burn a man alive because I have to be right.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Dogma. Yes. So moving to the Middle East now, we've got Jordan, where there's an £83 million plan, that's $100 million, aimed at drawing 1 million Christians to Al Muqtas in 2030 to commemorate what is seen as the 2000th anniversary of Jesus' baptism. Now that puzzles me that Jesus can have been baptized. Anyway, what they're doing is they're developing an area which is holy into a tourist attraction they're claiming that it will be a biblical village and the largest Christian pilgrimage and interfaith center in the region, because the River Jordan and its valley is loaded with religious importance for Jews and Muslims as well. So, but what's interesting is the guy who chairs this non-profit foundation set up by the Jordanian government to oversee the project to develop this area. He says it would be foolish and unwise to try and create a touristic destination that's based on commercialization and theme park type issues
Right.
in a site so holy. He's sort of holier than thou, isn't he? He's
Nah,
sort of,
it's just going to be a fight between Burger King and McDonald's. Who gets
Right.
yeah. He
But
goes
you know,
on to say,
if that's what's needed to desensitize people towards the holiness that's not holy, and if it brings money to a very poor area, and if it increases, I like the idea that it's interfaith. I mean, there are Christians who have money to go and visit the theme park. We spoke about theme parks before. We wanted to get one for the royal family of Britain. That's Guy and John. So I mean, I don't have a problem in principle with something like this happening. It's probably better than waging war or stoning people because they don't wear the hijabs properly. So if you want, as long as the money is raised by Christians, and then maybe it will help to get more interfaith action. And if, when those kids begin to eat McDonald's and Burger King, something might happen in their brain and they might begin to think, So,
Yeah,
well,
you never know.
It was his professed innocence that got me.
yeah.
He goes on to say, let's remember this is the third holiest site in Christianity. This is the site where Jesus got his calling. And so it would be highly inappropriate to corrupt it or violate it in any way. He's so angelic, isn't he?
I'm sure money has never corrupted anybody, really. Especially not Christians.
Right.
I mean, it's not as if one of the wealthiest organizations in the history of the world is the Catholic Church, So
Right.
Exactly.
I'm sure that type of corruption can be fought off,
Well, I mean, presumably it's only a matter of time before the birthplace of Billy Graham is venerated and turned into a shrine.
Frank, how are things since you're in Kentucky with the Creation Museum in the Ark Park?
Ooh, yes.
How's Ken Ham
Well,
Right, Ken Ham?
one of the I hadn't dug up all of the information yet, and I was going to pass this on to John. The Creation Museum, Ken Ham runs the place. Runs all of that in the state, really. He's got some hateful people on his staff that with videos of them demonstrating that. This is in development now. I'll try to have something ready next week to present.
Yeah.
But they're very active in both here and Tennessee.
Yeah,
And-
you went to an event, didn't you, Frank? You attended an event that was staged last week, was it?
Well, I didn't, but I week before that I heard Dan Phelps speak, but that was all rational people at that at Falls of Ohio, where we fossil beds. But there's a lot of activity, things, much money being invested apparently by the creationists in Kentucky and northern Tennessee.
And they've gotten government
area.
money, right? Haven't they gotten government money? See, that's the problem. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think they've ever turned a profit. And I could be wrong, but I don't think they've turned. Although they've gotten tons of tax breaks, and
they may not have any profit in terms of we've got this ark, pay and come see it. We got this museum, come pay and see it. I don't think that's turning a profit.
right.
But they are making lots of money by donations, mainly of of their membership, which is
Sure.
huge. You know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and because those are charitable donations,
Right.
those donees just write that stuff off.
Yeah.
But
Biggest mistake in
they
the
do get tax breaks that they shouldn't be getting.
Sure.
yes.
You know, I say that I don't think they should be getting it.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think any church, I mean, that's the thing in the United States, and I think this goes back to the founding of this country, which is why you sh- you guys in England should take us back. The whole idea that that any house of worship does not have to pay tax. You know, they have to pay employment tax and stuff like that, but they're untaxed, and that's a black hole, and that's the mafia as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
Mm.
it's the same in the UK. They don't pay taxes and they get tax breaks. Every pound that is donated to churches and other charities gets a subsidy from the government of, is it 15 or 20p on top, something like that.
Yes.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah. So it's exactly the same.
It's exactly the same. Yeah. Yeah.
Staying in that part of the world, moving to Israel, you may have heard that there's a new government there. It is the most religious and hardline right-wing government in Israeli history, but there's been protests. 80,000 protesters rallied in Tel Aviv because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has proposed changes to overturn their supreme, to make it easier for the parliament to overturn their Supreme Court rulings. So they're claiming that he's attacking democratic rule.
Hmm.
Well, I mean,
That's giving
the
it over
Tories
to a
in the
religious.
UK are trying to do something similar.
Hmm.
So
I
who's
mean, recently I attended a talk about the the Amnesty International report into Israel, and it's a big report. It's hundreds of pages long. It's taken 4 years, and as a result of that report, they have come to the conclusion that Israel is an apartheid state and is oppressing the Palestinians in a manner almost identical to the way in which blacks were treated in South Africa. And this is why I'm wearing this particular uh, sweatshirt that
Right.
says Palestine in Arabic there. So I'm very concerned about what's happening over there in that country.
why does it have drink Coke in Arabic there?
Going to the US, going to the US of A. Attorney General, this is Alabama, Steve Marshall, has become the most prominent Republican official up to now to suggest that, listen to this, pregnant women could be prosecuted for taking abortion pills.
Oh gosh, here we go.
yeah.
His office suggested that pregnant women could be prosecuted under an old, separate 2006 state law, which was set up to punish women for drug consumption during pregnancy.
My God.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's
Well,
extending that to, abortion pills.
Yeah.
In the United States, there's a new underground railroad, and it is set up for women who seek reproductive freedom to
Yes.
leave southern states to receive the medical care that they, as a human right, deserve and should have. And you see this time and time again. It's as bad as that guy from earlier saying that women aren't as smart as men. It's this violence against women, which is systemic in all faith traditions.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
I
absolutely.
mean, religion in whatever form, Christianity, Islam, just in whatever form, has bits of it that can be very problematic. In some cases, like in Islam. It's you know the dangers that lie in there. But then some people try to make Christianity look as though it is mild, it's a milder version. But there are beliefs and there are doctrines that, left in the hands of the average person can be very, very toxic.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
because the book is open to interpretation,
Hmm.
anyone can interpret whatever they see fit from the book. So it's
Hmm.
it just Christianity will always for me be a prop.
Hmm.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
Rorschach
reading the
test.
Bible is
Yeah.
like reading the quatrains of Nostradamus. You can come up with anything.
Mm.
Um, but on this abortion thing, I would like to suggest again uh, that secularists redefine those terms, change it to pro-autonomy for
Hmm.
those who want
Mm.
pro-choice, and
Mm.
pro-ideology for those who claim to be
Yeah.
pro-life, because
Hmm.
that is really what the reality of it is.
Something that
Yeah.
I wonder what the influence of the guilt complex. So women who
You
are
broke up there.
You broke
Yeah,
up.
your
Yeah.
microphone is not coming over, I'm afraid,
okay,
Tersia. So
okay. Now,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all a clip of a video of Pastor Steve Anderson. So we're staying with the States. Watch this. This is very well. I'll like to hear your reaction.
People who drink a lot of alcohol, they end up getting a beer belly. But not only do they get a beer belly, they get the man boobs. And I'll tell you why they get that. But not only just because of getting overweight, but also because of the fact that beer has in it hops, and there are phytoestrogen mimickers in beer that actually hormonally can, make you more feminine as a man. So the reverse of being so manly because you drink so much alcohol, in fact, drinking beer specifically can actually give you more feminine features to your body and cause you to, like I said.
Wow.
That's just sheer
He got his
brainlessness.
botany and biology degree out of a Cracker Jack box. That
Oh
guy.
my God.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
can you guys hear me? Is my microphone working?
yes, you
Yeah.
can hear you.
Yep.
Mhm.
We just had this discussion in my family on Friday because there was we met somebody, and it just showed me again how fluid the lines between what we regard as feminine and what we regard as masculine are, and how damaging it is to put people in boxes. And religion just works with extremes always. Religion
Mhm.
makes no provision that something like gender can be fluid, and that there's only the one extreme, the male and the female. It's always these two opposing ideas that are enforced, whereas gender and sexuality is so much more fluid in real life. I met somebody who identifies as female, but if you saw them walking down the street, you'd think it was a male, but they
Mm.
identify as female. Religion just makes it impossible to deal with the fluidity of things like gender and even so many other things, but gender in particular.
Well,
Obviously, that
religion
person you
guarantees
saw.
certainty, and that's part of it, right? So the idea of fluidity is things you don't know. And so,
Yeah, yeah.
by making these polar opposites, you're either one or you're the other thing. Nothing else
Mm.
exists, and that's it, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, that person that you saw, Tersia, walking down the street, and identifies as female but looks male, that person, the particular fluid that that person needs to consume is obviously beer.
Obviously, yes.
Are you guys
Poor
aware
James.
that I married a couple recently? I'm
Oh,
I'm a
why
marriage
don't you tell?
I'm a marriage commissioner here in British Columbia. We
Mm.
have to be, and it's a secular position. Outside of anyone in a church that's registered to do so. The secular option is for BC marriage commissioners, which I am. But I was approached by a couple of members of our Pastafarian church who wanted to marry, and the she's transitioning, gender fluid, um, and like a great couple. But I televised it, like I recorded it, I posted it on my YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out. It's on Mind Pirate. And some of the comments I got, I just couldn't believe how toxic they were. And again, why, like right in the thing, it says the first Pastafarian wedding in Canada. Why Christians want to gravitate to that anyway, because they're already set up for the fact that they're not going to like what they see. You know what I mean? Like, but just to then take the time to make these toxic comments and espouse these ridiculous beliefs is just beyond me.
I want to tell you a bit more about this Pastor Steve Anderson, because back in 2009, he delivered a sermon entitled "Why I Hate Barack Obama," in which he prayed for the death of the then president, saying, "I'm going to prove from the Bible tonight why I should hate Barack Obama, why God wants me to hate Barack Obama, why God hates Barack Obama." And then, a bit later in a BBC documentary, the interviewer asked him, "What do you think homosexuals should do then?" And he replied, "They should kill themselves. I don't have any advice for homosexuals except to put a bullet through your own head."
Wow.
So
and some do, just out of, because the way that society treats them,
I'm glad these people reveal their thoughts so we don't have to guess who they are.
Yeah.
You know, at least they're giving us a heads up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fairly unambiguous.
I'd like to see him force-fed beer to turn him more feminine.
Yeah.
He has man boobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did Maya Angelou say? When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Don't try to second guess.
Yeah.
And I think she was just brilliantly, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to touch on an item that we reviewed a few weeks ago. You may remember there was at Yeshiva University, not far from you, David, there was a contretemps because it's an Orthodox Jewish school and it refused to recognize an LGBTQ student club. So they filed a lawsuit. And this is now turned into a class action, spreading as far as Oregon. And the lawsuit now is on behalf of about 40 students and former students at religious schools nationwide in the US. And the case claims that these departments failed to protect LGBTQ plus students from discrimination. And as you may know, the students have staged walkouts, sit-ins, and protests. But let's take a look at what the judge in the Oregon Federal District Court ruled. He said, the plaintiffs, these are the people claiming that they were discriminated against, do not plausibly demonstrate that the religious exemption was motivated by any impermissible purpose, let alone that Congress was wholly motivated by such an impermissible purpose. What does that sound like to you?
Sounds like bullshit to me.
It sounds like it was wholly motivated.
Right. Yeah.
It sounds like he's scraping the barrel to get them off the hook.
Yeah, and they'll appeal because there's higher courts to appeal to for this. And I'm sure what just because of one judge's obvious bias, they'll appeal this.
Yeah. And the only people to benefit will be the lawyers.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Staying in the US, 36 historic black religious sites
Hmm.
have been granted $4 million of state funding to help them with renovations and preservations of their buildings. Is that a legitimate use of taxpayers' money?
I
Well,
don't think it is, but I object to it less than other things that are being
exactly.
done. You
Yeah.
know, it's hard for me to get or take my angst about government treatment of religion in the first place. I don't want to aim it at that. I don't think this is, they're doing
They're
so
a big-
many.
It shouldn't be a special feature. It should
Yeah.
be
They're a big
straight across the board. Either you keep it or you get rid of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
You're
mean,
saying
we're
that-
talking about preservation of history. The way
Yeah.
I look at it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say that. I mean, in the UK, for instance, some of our medieval cathedrals get
Yeah.
government help to preserve their fabric because they are amazingly beautiful pieces of art heritage.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, where I draw the line is if any of this public money is being used directly or indirectly to promote religion. That's
Right.
the problem.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good.
Exactly. That's right.
Yes.
There are cultural and historical reasons for tax money to be used to preserve some of those buildings, and
Right.
I'm glad to see when a famous college church, for example, burns. I'm happy to see it rebuilt. If it's part of there are things bigger than religion that religion is involved in.
Right.
Okay, that's very
It's
balanced
a
view, I
difficult
think.
line to draw, though, because clearly, if you restore a rundown religious building, then a side product is the promotion and reinforcement of the religious community that's there, and maybe it'll attract more adherents.
Exactly.
So I don't know how you draw this line. And
Yeah.
the same goes, I mean, in the UK, quite a few cathedrals have had public money. And interestingly enough, the Christian communities around cathedrals are thriving and healthy, whereas local churches, they're often dying out.
Yeah.
So, difficult one.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a risk of reinvigorating what you are hoping will wither away. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see these buildings actually recovered for civilian use, really.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I think there's something coming up, isn't there, John?
yes, there is. Yes, we've got something like that. Well, actually, this morning in the AUK podcast that we recorded, there was talk about. I think Esther pointed out that a lot of Anglican churches are now empty and up for sale, and I revealed that I've always wanted to buy an old church, if only for the address. I mean, imagine getting letters to John Richards, Chapel of the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
I should let you know
wanted to
that the
do that as well.
Pastafarians right now, our Pastafarian church is housed in an old church. We
Yeah.
we have use of an old church, which is what we share with the girl guides. But
Great.
that's where we
Well,
hold our meetings.
in South Africa, where we have many small congregations, I've actually seen in some of the homeowners magazines and about trends and interior decorating, where a couple bought an old church building, but it's colonial, so it's a smallish building, and they live in it. They've revamped it.
Yeah.
They've put travel at. It's lovely. They're artists and they have a studio. I mean, and there are many. For example, in South Africa, we have churches with fantastic that are not being used. So in that case, I
Yeah, I'm
By
sorry,
government?
your
Am
connection
I?
is poor.
Yeah, you dropped a little.
Yeah.
It caught
Okay.
most of it. It caught most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
Tersia,
No,
your
it's
connection
fine.
is a bit
Voice.
dodgy. So, staying because you introduced the cathedrals, we'll stay with the Church of England, where the bishops have been arguing for the last 5 years over whether or not to allow their priests to marry same-sex couples, and they've come up with a decision. I think it's a decision, which is we're not going to marry you, but we will give you God's blessing.
And take your money.
Yes, and there's an update on that, which is that the leader of this organization, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has today released the information that he personally is not going to do any blessing of same-sex couples because he doesn't think it would be appropriate for the leader of this organization that's supposed to keep everyone together. And meanwhile, of course, the rest of the world where the Anglican community exists is really up in arms because the African churches do not want any acknowledgement of homosexual relationships. And amazingly, the Episcopalians in America are now coming round to the idea that maybe it's okay to bless and marry gays. So we're going to see this rift widen. And as I said earlier, I'm hoping that it will split before May so that there's a dispute over who should crown the king.
Well, it's funny that the Church of England is split even within the UK because recently there was a new Bishop of Blackburn, which is only about 20, 30 miles from where I live. And this bishop, it does not approve of women priests.
Yes.
And he's at the ultimate, and for some reason or other, rather than letting these people sort of die out, they're still there, this minority, and they seem to get into positions of power from time to time, and there are churches all over the place where they refuse to have female priests.
Yes.
So you think, oh.
Well, I'm going to finish with what I'm not sure how to take this. In one aspect, it's a lighter item, but in the other aspect, it isn't. So I'm going to play this clip to you, and then tell you why this lovely little dance is not as lovely as we might wish. Take a look at this. You know, get the time for the hate and the bad energy. Come on, mind on my money. Make you dance like broccoli. Steady going like broccoli. Steady on my grind, oh yeah, what they want me. Good in my fantasy. What they check with my dog, you know wrong. But it rush, where it be much. Nobody make my dog in the rush. The kind money we touch. Yeah, it rush, where it be much. No be hype, everybody they come. Isn't that lovely? She's choreographed it. They've learned it and practiced like Billy-O to get it up to that standard.
And she got killed, right?
No, it's not quite as bad as that yet. The dance was recorded in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and launched onto TikTok. And it's had lots of views, but they've been arrested, all three of them, for violating public decency. Huh?
Yes, I'm shocked. I'm still shocked by those moves. My goodness.
Yeah, honestly. What can you make of it, eh? I don't know.
Well, I hope they're safe. I hope there's a way for them to be not harmed too much.
Well, maybe, I hope we don't have to report worse news next week.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, guys,
so
thank you.
Will you keep John? Will you keep an eye on that story? So
Sure.
it would be really interesting to be able to follow it and just maybe if it ends well, then maybe there's some hope.
Yes. So, guys, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for
your
having us.
Yes.
See you guys.
Say bye-bye. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Several clergy in Russia.
So was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that guy?